Hello everyone, welcome to a special Thanksgiving edition of Off the Menu. I'm Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with a gratitudinous Charles Coulombe.
Gratitudinous, not platitudinous.
No, it's Thanksgiving, Charles.
Well, that's good, because you know what? Gratitudinous about fits how I feel right now. Grateful, full of greatness. No, but I do feel grateful. I do feel a great deal of gratitude.
About what, Charles?
Oh gosh, where do I start? Have you noticed that it's 30 degrees outside and I'm not freezing?
How is that?
Well, it's because I've got a roof over my head. Notice I've got clothes to wear. I'm eating. I'm at school learning interesting things. I'm able to write things about things that interest me and get paid for it. I turned 60 years old at the beginning of the month, and I am really, really grateful. I'm really grateful for everything. If you were to ask me my attitude, not just toward this moment, but the past 60 years of life, I am grateful for the whole kit and caboodle. I mean, I had wonderful parents and an annoying but often enjoyable brother who gave me 10 nephews and nieces whom I love very much. Actually, there are only 8, but who's counting? But I love them very, very much indeed. I've got, through my life, I had incredible mentors, the best friends a man could ever ask for. I'm French Canadian on my dad's side. I'm living I've traveled to so many wonderful, wonderful places, both in and outside the United States. I'm living in a country that I love as well. I mean, how could I not be happy? I've learned a lot of things I've enjoyed learning. I've read all sorts of books and seen all sorts of movies and had all sorts of pleasant experiences. I mean, there have been annoyances in my life, without a doubt. But that's not really what I remember. I remember the good times. The bad times take effort for me to recall, and it's not worth it. If I live to be 90 years old, then my life is 2/3 over right now. Now, it's not likely I'll live that long, but yeah, well, who knows? But the truth is that the first 2/3 have been a blast, really, on the average. And I'm this weird lockdown that we're going through is kind of an adventure for me in a weird way. And of course, I'm very grateful for the kids that I'm trapped here with. They're a lot of fun. I've got this wondrous show and our really tremendous audience, and I'm not joking about that, because I do hear from them, as you do, and they're by and large, they're a wonderful bunch of people, really, all over the world. It really amazes me. We've got Dutchmen and Slovaks and Filipinos and Singaporeans, Latin Americans of all sorts, Canadians.
A lot of Brazilians too. I only discovered that recently when we were focusing on the Brazilian Empire, and I forgot the emperor's name who abolished slavery.
Dom Pedro.
Oh yeah. They really showed themselves for that.
Well, and as they should, and to tell you the truth, I'm also grateful for our Orthodox watchers. I was thinking of that. I was approached by a group of our Orthodox brethren, and we had kind of a private Skype session. But they were all a very, very conservative branch of Orthodoxy. I won't say what, because it would get them into trouble. But they made a very good point to me, which is that really, once you accept the fact that the schism is not a good thing, then it's insane that negotiations for reunion or reconciliation, or whatever you want to call it, should be carried on by the most liberal of either set. Certainly, it should be the most orthodox with the small o that these guys said to me. And of course, that makes perfect sense, which is why it's not happening, except privately and, but at any rate, I am grateful for our Orthodox viewers. I'm grateful for our Ordinariate viewers, our Anglican viewers, our non-Catholic, non-Christian viewers. I'm grateful for all of you. And from time to time, it's made known to me that we have benefited people in various ways, and that nothing could make me happier than that. There's, gentlemen and ladies and gentlemen, I know that life is very difficult and unpleasant in general for a lot of us out there, but bear in mind that usually our ancestors had it worse than we do, in one way or the other. They certainly, one of the things that makes me giggle is when people talk about one-worlders and globalization. It's a fact of life. Whether we like it or not, we're all one-worlders. We're all globalists. And if you're a Catholic, if you're a Christian, you always have been in a sense. It's a question of what kind of one world it is that we're looking at. What kind of globalization? Certainly, and to a great degree, I think that's a great thing. When I go on Twitter and I see all sorts of great ideas expressed in languages that normally I couldn't access, Slovenian or Czech or what have you, a click of a switch and I can read exactly what they're up to, and I can say, wow, that's neat, and love it and retweet it. That, to me, this is miraculous. I think that, like everything else, it certainly is admissible of abuse and misuse, without a doubt. But it can also be used well. It's like the Roman roads. Sure, the Roman roads were used to transport all sorts of terrible things to Rome and back. But they also allowed the faith to go from the Holy Land to Britain in a very quick period of time. So that's the way you have to look at these things. In God's providence, everything, whether we like it or not, everything has a purpose. It's just that sometimes the purpose is uncomfortable. Sometimes the thing used we don't particularly like. I'm not what you would call a great fan of John XII, the Pope, but I do appreciate his confirming the Charter of Cluny. So, and that's the other thing too. You've got to bear in mind that we don't know, ladies and gentlemen, because we're in the middle of an historical chapter. We don't know how it's going to turn out. We don't really know, as a result, the true significance of anything. For all we know, the recent election nonsense might precipitate something wonderful in 20 years. I don't know what. I'm pulling this out of the air, but that's the way things happen in history. Actions have long-term consequences, and very often the thing that seems so terrible at the moment, well, if it hadn't happened, something good would not have happened later on. I've often said, that had any of the causes that I believe in historically triumphed, I would never have been born. And that, when I get too overwrought or upset about the course of things, I have to remind myself of that. It's not that everything's wonderful and that we should just sit back and enjoy everything is also great. That's not what I mean. What I mean is that we do have to be aware that at the end of it all, the most powerful force in the cosmos is a benevolent God who chose for his own reasons first to call us into being and then to die for us. And that, you and I had a mutual friend who for years would whine and complain that God didn't consult him about creating him.
Okay.
Well, he was a friend of your brother's, really. You may not remember.
Yeah, I don't.
You remember the individual, but you probably won't remember the complaining.
Okay.
But that used to drive me crazy because until one day I realized it's because he fundamentally was not happy being himself. Because if you are at bottom of it happy with being you, how can you be other than grateful to God for making you? How can you have other than gratitude at the bottom of it all? I don't see how. But if fundamentally you're unhappy being you, you wish you were either somebody else or non-existent, well, yeah, then I could see where that argument would make a certain amount of sense. Why did God create me to be such a miserable piece of garbage? I can think of some people I wish would ask themselves that question. But oddly enough, the people who really are miserable pieces of garbage never ask themselves why God made them that way. Usually, as with the case I'm citing, the person in question is actually fairly decent. Just I don't know, needs to get mad right. But the real villains and morons and annoying people, they never catch on. Anyway, long story short, short story long. Even though I'm going to have a morsel of turkey tomorrow, because in real time, ladies and gentlemen, I guess you'll be seeing this on Thanksgiving, will they? Is this going to be released?
I'm going to release this early morning Thanksgiving, yeah.
Oh, all right. Well, so this is kind of like our Thanksgiving special.
Yeah.
It's like the Macy's Day Parade.
Exactly.
It's like the Twilight Zone Marathon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, ladies and gentlemen, you could reproduce that by, after you see this, watching back-to-back off the menus, literally till you pass out, because there are enough of them.
Very true.
You could do your own off-the-menu marathon for Thanksgiving.
We've got the playlist. I've got the playlist all sorted out. Full episodes, 1 through what is this? This will be 167.
Wow. See, ladies and gentlemen, you could have yourself your very own off-the-menu marathon for Thanksgiving, and because you can't possibly get through them all in one day, not by any stretch, this could become a recurring Thanksgiving tradition for you and your family. Just think of it. Nothing to do but, before and after the dinner itself, nothing to do but try to relax with the uncomfortable, overstuffed feeling and watch Don Vincenzo and May yap at each other endlessly. Wouldn't that be a thrill?
That would be wonderful.
Boy, the opportunities some people have. Well, I don't suggest you put yourselves through that. I would watch the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade or the Twilight Zone Marathon.
Okay.
One year, I did the Perry Mason Marathon, which I liked.
Okay.
I like Perry Mason.
Yeah, my mom loves Perry Mason too. She actually finally got off that. She was watching it every day. She finally was done with it. So.
Why? Would she seen each one 4 times?
I don't know. I guess just the formula kind of got tiresome and tedious for her.
I still love Perry Mason.
Yeah.
I think part of it is because when I was little, that's what the world looked like. I mean, it wasn't black and white, but that's how people dressed and so forth and acted.
Yeah.
But anyway, so long and the short of it is, and there's that. Let me just say one more thing as to what I'm grateful for. I'm also grateful that I remember the tail end of the before time. I'm grateful that I remember men wearing hats, women wearing slips, men rising when a chick came in the room, holding the door for them. I'm glad I remember that, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad I remember my mother taking me to tea at Bullock's, Wiltshire, and the women all in hats and gloves. I remember that. I remember the buses filled with housewives, because in those days housewives didn't drive generally. And so you didn't have a lot of foul-mouthed kids running around. You had kids. And see, in those days, if a kid used foul language, any adult would correct him. There was no, does your mother know you talk like that? That kind of thing.
Okay.
But to be fair, we also lived in a separate world from the adults. I mean, kids today are completely supervised and everything. But we lived in an alternate world with its own hierarchies, its own, and our world and the adult world impinged on each other. But
no,
I think we're a lot freer as children than they are today.
Okay. So I myself am grateful for very many things. I would just like to mention that I'm especially grateful for everyone who buys books at Tumblr House. I was thinking about this because I was thinking about this when I switched from Twitter to Parler. I kind of am trying to migrate, and everyone's wondering, well, is it as good as a Twitter experience in terms of connecting with other people and seeing what's going on? No, it's a lot less crowded. But when using an alternative, you have to make some exceptions a little bit. And so for everyone who buys from Tumblr House, don't think that I don't know that it's so much easier to get all the books on Amazon in just a couple clicks, and boom. And so that makes me especially grateful and appreciative. And I get some criticism from some people that I don't ever come down from the Tumblr House tower, but that's not actually true. And if you've bought books from Tumblr House, chances are you know that, because I've gotten in the habit this year for all the books that I personally ship, which is the vast majority. I send you a little note and a prayer card thanking you. And because I do feel grateful for everything, it's tremendously fulfilling to see to be a small part of someone's development.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how rewarding that feels.
Definitely.
And I just kind of wanted to it's my way of letting people know that I am grateful, and that I don't know. I like doing business that way because it shows that it's more personal. You're not just a number. It's a person-to-person transaction. I think that's the problem with a lot of these big companies like Amazon. Like, it's just, you get the impression that it's just a bunch of machines running everything, and it's kind of inhuman in a way. And I want business to change from that, and I hope it does change, because I don't know. There's just so many things wrong in business nowadays. You could write a book on it.
I know a fellow who runs a publishing house. Maybe you'd think about writing something like that.
Ha ha ha! No, I'm not a writer. Not a big time writer. But maybe an article one day.
Well, that's better than nothing.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, because it is Thanksgiving, you know what the chicks in the secretarial pool are doing?
What?
They're rehearsing. Tomorrow.
Yeah, Turkey Lurkey Day.
They're going to do Turkey Lurkey Day.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, That's become kind of a tradition around the Tumbler House Tower. And they're going to do Turkey Lurkey Day, and Tyrone and security, and the motor pool guys, the gardeners and maintenance, everybody is going to file into the auditorium, and it's going to be a huge production number this year. So they wanted me to let you know that they're grateful that you gave them the rehearsal time.
You're welcome. All right, time for the memes.
Okay. What do we got?
Right.
I should say, but because it's Thanksgiving, I'm going to do it in a very genteel, non-rabble-rousing way.
Okay.
Nationalize the memes of production.
For the common good. What should we start with? We have a bunch of memes today that I'm happy to say. Well, let's start with yours, Charles. I mean, they're not memes, but you want me to show some of these pictures?
I did.
So let's do that. First one, you have a person holding American flag on a turkey with a pumpkin. It's very, what's the word? Is it Rockwellian? I don't know. It kind of is evocative in that sense.
Well, it's late 19th century, early 20th century.
Yeah.
It's very, turn of that century. It gives a feeling for the way Americans looked at Thanksgiving back then.
Yeah.
It's kind of kitschy, but I like it.
Yeah, I like it too. And then your second picture that you submitted, this is the bald eagle patting the turkey on the back. The day we have two national birds.
That's right.
Yeah.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, I'd much rather have turkey stuffed than bald eagle.
That's for sure. You'd go to prison if you stuffed the bald eagle, right?
It puts me in mind of an old joke.
What?
It puts me in mind of an old joke.
Yeah, what joke?
Oh, well, this fellow was out in the woods and he was lost. And he tried everything to try to signal for help. Nothing worked. And then he was terribly hungry. So he was able to lay a snare and catch a spotted owl, which he cooked and ate. Well, the smoke from his fire was noticed by the rangers, and they immediately jumped on him and found that he'd eaten a protected animal. So he was sent away to await trial. Well, he gets up and he says to the judge, "Look, Your Honor, I had been lost. I was hungry. I was miles away from anything. I had tried to signal for help. Nothing happened. I was so hungry. I grabbed whatever I could. If I had realized it was a protected species, I wouldn't have done it. And these are weird circumstances. I would never dream of doing it normally, and I certainly will never do it again." And the judge said, "Well, all right, suspended sentence." And that was that. Well, the guy leaves, the judge leaves, it was his last case for the day, and they run into each other in the elevator. And he said, "Look, I gotta ask you a question. I couldn't ask you this when I was sitting on the bench because it would have looked bad for me as your judge to ask the question, but it's really killing me. What exactly does spotted owl taste like?" The fellow says, "Well, it's kind of hard to describe. It's sort of midway between bald eagle and whooping crane."
Okay. So that person eats all these... Wow. What a monster.
What?
This guy's eating everything under the sun.
No, just protected species.
Wow.
He'd I don't know. He won't touch regular white-tailed deer. But those little key deer from Florida, good. The poor things are only about yay big. They're very tiny, and they're very endangered.
Wow. All right. That is brutal. That really is brutal. Okay.
Turkey Lurkey Day.
Next meme is a Babylon Bee article. So we must cancel Thanksgiving, says CDC scientist who looks suspiciously like a turkey in a lab coat. I thought that was an especially cute one. Let me just read what it says at the bottom of this article. That turkey says we all must make sacrifices, and honestly, with the way things are looking, we should probably cancel Thanksgiving next year, and even the year after that. In fact, maybe we even make a new holiday where eating a bird isn't the main event. I'm just saying. Hey, wait a minute! Shouted one man at the press conference. He's a turkey. Get him! The man was thrown out for being racist and anti-science. That's cute.
Delicious.
It makes me wonder whether Governor Newsom is a turkey.
If he is, I sure hope someone slaughtered it.
You can't say that.
I didn't say it.
All right. Next one is from Eternal Memory TV. Really popular memes publication. So you've got Father Robert Spitzer. And Father Robert Spitzer's in Orange County. You can kind of see the Crystal Cathedral on the back left, just as a FYI. But anyhow, he didn't really say this, but they have him say, "Have you seen cathedrals of Europe? We are barbarians living in the ruins of an advanced civilization."
And you thought I was harsh.
That's so true. That's so true.
Yeah,
we can't do that anymore.
Well, we can, sort of, kind of, but not easily.
Yeah, I've always wondered what art and architecture would look like if Christendom is ever fully revived. Would it simply resemble an older age, or what new characteristics would it have?
Yeah, that's a fair question.
Because I always wonder, I kind of asked you, is there unexplored space when it comes to political philosophy? And you said there's nothing new under the sun. But I wonder if there's unexplored space when it comes to art and architecture. Because, I don't know, my favorite period in painting is Impressionism. Yeah. That was something new. That was something that hadn't really happened. But you had underlying things which brought about Impressionism. There were a lot of changes in society. The biggest thing is that, historically art always had a patron. You're doing it for something. You're doing it for the church. And so artists were painting for somebody specifically. But in the 19th century, finally there were open markets of art. People could become painters and then just put their art on the market. And so that allowed them to express themselves and what's inside them. And it sort of gave them a freedom to do these new things. And from that new situation came new art. So I don't know. It's just, I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I hope there's new unexplored space. For some reason, I don't like the idea of art and architecture just rehashing, Renaissance or Baroque, Gothic architecture, stuff like that. What do you think, Charles?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, the problem is we're dealing with what ifs and the future. I mean, but I'll give you an example. You take the great American architect Ralph Adams Cram, and you take Salvador Dali. Now, Cram was a neo-Gothicist, but his Gothic was not simply an imitation of what had gone before. He did interesting things with Gothic. There was still definitely recognizably Gothic, but he pulled off some amazing effects. Dali, on the other hand, when he wasn't doing surrealism, he nevertheless pulled off some religious pictures that were obviously modern, but nevertheless extremely reverent. I'm thinking here in particular one with the crucifix, but it's from, as it were, God's point of view.
Yeah, I looked that one up after you mentioned it before. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Um, the thing about mankind is that we really are endlessly creative. We really are. And when people of talent have the right belief, they can come up with things as different as a Michelangelo statue and an icon of the same subject.
I'm gonna put the painting of Salvador Dali. I just looked it up, and so I'm putting it up for everybody. So it's kind of a cube cross. That's
Yeah.
You almost could say the way the cross looks, it kind of is modernistic. It reminds me of the cathedral in Los Angeles, the way it's kind of done.
In a way, except unlike the cathedral, you can see that it's done out of reverence and not,
right. And then these characters are, or is it one or two people? I can't tell, but it's almost they're kind of on a chessboard of things, and it's really bleak background. But yeah, but that's a good example of something new that hasn't really been done before. But I guess modern art also hasn't been done before, but that in a bad way.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Anyhow, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to show everybody.
No, that's fun.
Was there more that you wanted to say on this?
No, I think not. I mean, no.
Okay. Okay. So wait. So what was your answer in terms of whether something new can emerge?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure it can. Under circumstances that at the moment we can't really imagine.
Yeah.
And that's the trick, you see. We can't imagine.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We have one last meme. I've saved the best for last. This could be the meme of 2020. Well, it's not a meme, but it's just so incredible. Now, this was submitted by Anthony Stein, owner of the Return to Tradition YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Here we go. He's a fan of the show. He submitted this. And now this is a Twitter post. And it says, in the Welsh Christmas tradition of Mary Lloyd, a horse skull visits your home singing rhymes outside your door.
As it should.
And then Wholesome Pyromaniac adds, that's not even the best part. The person inside needs to sing back with excuses why Lloyd can't come in. Goes back and forth until one gives up. If the person in the house can't respond, they let Lloyd in, and it gets to raid your pantry and drink all your beer. And another person named Oddbrock has perhaps the best Twitter comment of 2020. So he says, so you're rap battling a horse skeleton to keep all your alcohol? And here I thought the Welsh had nothing to offer besides consonants.
Very good. Very good.
Wow. What do you think of this, Charles?
Well, I think it's an extremely interesting, if somewhat bizarre, well, all right, very bizarre, custom, very Celtic, possibly a Krampus-like figure, reminding what bad children would get if they weren't good.
Were you aware of this tradition before we sent it your way?
Yeah, I sure was.
Is it perhaps the weirdest that you've encountered?
I don't know about the weirdest, but it's pretty weird. It is really pretty weird.
How can you get more weird than that?
Oh, don't ever ask that kind of question. Don't ever ask that question. See, the problem is weird. You know what they say, weird is weird does. I just don't ask that question. We'll just leave it at that.
What's with the horse skull? Like, what does that emanate from? I mean,
I don't know. A dead horse, presumably.
But why? I guess that's the question.
Somebody beat it.
Somebody beat the horse?
Somebody beat the dead horse, and that's what happened. That's what you got. You remember they're always telling you don't beat a dead horse? You know that.
Yeah.
Well, don't beat a dead horse, so it'll appear at your door and want beer.
What are some other weird traditions, Charles, that come to mind?
Oh, I think probably hunting the wren is pretty weird.
What is that, a bird?
It's a bird, little bird.
Yeah.
And in Ireland, on the day after Christmas, the 26th, the boys will go around, groups of boys will go around, and they'll kill a wren. And then they'll put it on this sort of wicker thing that they make. And they'll take it from door to door and collect money for the funeral.
Is that a day of the year? What celebration is that?
St. Stephen's Day, the day after Christmas. The wren, the king of all birds. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Yeah.
Sounds like a racket to me, where you kill an animal and then make everyone overpay for a funeral.
Well, they don't necessarily overpay because, very little of the money actually goes to the funeral. It goes to the necessary refreshments for the wren boys.
That's weird. I don't understand it. So, do people actually give money, or they say no?
Gosh,
forget
yes. No, they expect it. They expect the wren boys to come around. It's like trick or treat.
Yeah, but with money, like how much money would you give? Like, what's customary there?
Oh gosh, I don't know. A couple of euros, who knows?
And this is Irish?
Yeah.
Is it a big thing or a pretty obscure thing, like a regional?
Yeah, it's a big thing. I mean, I don't know how common it is today, but when I was a kid, it was big stuff. Of course, they didn't have euros in those days. They had pounds and shillings and pence.
Did you ever participate in this? Did you go door to door with a dead wren and ask for money?
Well, no, they didn't have wrens in Hollywood.
No, I mean, but when you're in Ireland.
No, never. In Hollywood, we would go door to door the day after Christmas with a dead rat and offer to leave it if they didn't pay for us.
That's
you didn't you didn't hunt the rat when you were a kid after Christmas Day?
Nope.
Go door to door and offer to leave it on the doorstep if they didn't pay you?
No, that's coercion.
That's not coercion. It's folklore. It's a custom.
Not every folk tradition should be kept. Some.
Oh, you don't like. But hunting the rat is a deep part of who we were as Hollywood people. The rat symbolized the industry itself.
You're just making things up.
Why would I do that?
I don't know, but you always do it.
Well, I'm shocked. So you don't think we went door to door carrying a rat?
No, I don't.
Well, we didn't. But we did. The story I told you about sacrificing the turtles, that was true.
What?
I told you that story.
No.
Well, when we lived in the Criswell building, there was this incinerator. Now, see, in Los Angeles, but even before we got there, it was illegal by the time we arrived. Most of the houses in the urban area in LA had these cement and metal incinerators that people would incinerate their garbage in. Now, because that contributed to the terrible smog problem, it was done away with like in 1958 or something. But the incinerator was still there at the back of the Criswell building. Unused. Well, it so happened that we had brought out from the east with us 6 painted turtles that my brother and I had caught in the creek back home. And we had managed, despite the best efforts of life, to keep them alive and happy. Unfortunately, 4 of them, of the 6, died in one day. We never knew what killed them. But we figured it was probably smart to isolate them from the two healthy ones. We figured they must have gotten a disease or something. So we, got the two healthy ones out of there, and they lived another several years. But the 4 dead ones, we took out to the incinerator because my brother had the idea that we should give them a Viking funeral. Now, what I didn't mention was that the convent of the Immaculate Heart nuns, with whom we'd already crossed swords at various times, looked right out onto our backyard, specifically Sister Christian's window. And she would shriek at us, go in and do your homework whenever we'd be out back playing, which kind of was annoying. So we, within the incinerator, we got little pieces of wood and things like that and built a funeral pyre, and then laid the dead turtles on it and doused the whole thing with lighter fluid and set it aflame. And before you knew it, there were big gobs of greasy gray smoke pouring into the convent window. Well, Sister Christian was attracted by the odor, apparently, and sticks her head out and says, "What's that horrible stench?" And Andre looks up at her with this manic look on his face and says, "It's the sweet savor of sacrifice." And she says, "What are you burning?" And he says, "Turtles." And she says, "Are they alive?" And Andre replies, "What good's a dead sacrifice, sister? It's a good thing turtles can't scream." So she slammed the window.
I like your brother.
No, he has some good points, that's for sure. He's 7 years older than me, so this was part of my training in the ways of the world.
Wow.
Learned a lot from my brother.
That's a good story.
Isn't it? But you like that better than taking the rat around every day, every St. Stephen's Day after Christmas.
Yeah.
You think that's an obnoxious story, don't you?
Yeah.
Penny for the rat? Penny for the rat?
No. All right. Just a couple announcements. That episode on Blessed Charles is still coming up. If you've bought the book, feel free to send in your questions on Blessed Charles. We have a handful of questions already submitted, and I've got a bunch of questions lined up. So somewhere in the future, maybe next episode, we'll see. So send them in. Let's see. The plan for this episode, we're gonna make it a laid back episode. We've got some monarchist questions to start off with, and then we're just gonna settle into questions on Charles's favorite things and some book recommendations. Nothing too dismal for Thanksgiving. This is gonna be a nice Thanksgiving episode.
I like that.
Okay, here are the questions. First one is from Gabriella. Question for Charles. In the North Country, Canada, we have people called Scrutineers, whose job it is to make sure all voting is legitimate. Each political party has scrutineers at every polling station. Scrutineers are able to challenge voters they think are ineligible. They also watch the ballot counting. This tends to keep our elections fair and legitimate. Why does the U.S. persist in holding on to a voting system which is the envy of third world regimes? Will Biden now have to wear military uniforms loaded with fake medals to fit in with all the other Banana Republic leaders who have also won fixed elections?
What a thing to say. I don't believe I'm hearing that. Firstly, let me tell you something, Mr. Canadian inhabitant of a oppressive...
Gabrielle.
Sorry, Gabrielle. Mrs. Canadian, slave of a debauched monarchy rather than citizen of a free republic. If we needed honest elections, we'd have them. Yeah. And the very fact that we know that even having ID is racist shows you that scrutineers are this close to Klansmen. That's why we don't have them. And you know what else? We don't wait for the writs to be read. We don't have no writs because we don't have a queen. So instead of writs of election, I don't know exactly what we do, but whatever it is, it must be better because we do it. So there. No, all kidding aside, it is embarrassing. Of course, it's embarrassing. The whole thing is ridiculous. The whole system. Election fraud is an ancient democratic tradition with a small d, going all the way back to Athens. It's always been big business in the States, but you can mitigate it. You can limit it to a great degree, and Scrutineers are a very good way of doing it. And there are a lot of other ways you can do it. But unfortunately, for obvious reasons, it was decided to do all sorts of things that lend themselves to fraud and to the suspicion of fraud. And that the one can be as bad as the other, actually. The suspicion of fraud. Because once people lose faith in the electoral system, the whole thing goes out the window. That's why Richard Nixon did not dispute the election of 1960, the day I was born. Just thought I'd point that out. Because he realized, as he put it, that it would cause far more damage to the country than a Kennedy administration could ever do. And I think he was right. Obviously, 40 years later, Al Gore did not. And 20 years after that, it's just madness on parade. Because we know that whatever happens, at least half the population are going to be sure that the sitting president stole the election. And that
Okay.
There's nothing good can come out of that.
Okay. Question from Matthew.
Okay.
How could an authentic Catholic monarchy be restored in our world today, and what is the best argument for monarchy versus republicanism?
Those are two very big questions.
Okay, let's start with the first one.
Well, despite what I wrote in Star Spangled Crown, and of course, always the possibility that if there is some sort of regime change, something could be forced, as it were. Usually, this stuff has to come from the bottom up. I mean, I wish it were otherwise. I wish there was an easy way to do it, a quick way, but I really don't think there is. I wish it were so. I really do, but I just don't. I don't see it.
Yeah, because you need a kingly people first, right?
Yeah, I mean, we need to be a people who deserve a king, and Lord knows we're not.
Yeah,
we are what we are.
So, okay, what is the best argument for monarchy versus republicanism?
Well, I mean that I've written extensively on that very issue, to be honest with you, and I would even on the Tumblr House website you'll see by having done so. But in a nutshell, there are several answers I can give you. One is religious. God is a king. God is a monarch. And human governance should reflect divine governance to the ability that we're able to. That's one. Two, a king, an emperor, is the ruler of all his people, not just the party that put him in power. Three, he can make long-term policies. He doesn't worry about getting reelected. Four, he's been trained for the job from childhood and doesn't have to spend half his time learning it and the other half of his time trying to get elected again. Five, the transmission of the crown from one generation to the next is done through, if you'll pardon the expression, an act of love and not mere grasping politics, which is, as they say, war by other means. the king can and usually does consider himself father of all of his people in a way that a president simply can't. And of course, there's the other side of it. A king, we can imagine a king dying for his people because they have. It goes with the job if it comes to it. It's very hard to imagine the vast majority of presidents of any country dying for their people. Sending their people to die for them, yes. Sacrificing themselves, no. Maybe, as with Nixon, they'd sacrifice their career for their people. But it's not the same thing.
Who said the first argument? Because I've heard that before. Was it a pope or St. Thomas Aquinas, where it mimics the Godhead? Monarchy minute.
St. Thomas.
Yeah.
St. Thomas says that. St. Robert Bellarmine says it.
Yeah.
A lot of people have said it.
Yeah. And it's true. It does.
Well, what about Governor Newsom? He mimics a god of some kind. Bacchus, maybe?
A false god.
Yeah, well, I didn't say real god. Yeah, false god.
All right.
You don't like Governor Newsom.
No, he's not my favorite person.
I get that feeling.
Yeah.
Because, like, whenever I bring him up, I feel this cold wave come out of you. I don't feel the warm sense of approval that I do when I talk about other people.
Yeah.
I think there's a lack of harmony between you and our governor. I really do.
I don't know if I've said this on the show, but he thanked his Jesuit education, like in June. He's Catholic.
Yeah, of course he's Catholic. He's just like his Aunt Nancy Pelosi. One of the things that cracks me up is that people don't realize that it's one extended family that run the state of California. They never pick up on that, and nobody ever says it. But we're basically like a long machine in California. And people never catch it. Could you imagine back in the days when Russell Long was senator and his Uncle Earl was the governor and all that? People would always say, oh, well, those Longs. Nobody ever catches the fact that the Pelosi's / Brown / Newsom family run California.
Wait, Brown is in that family?
Yeah, by marriage. They're all related. And they're all Jesuit pupils. The men, anyway.
Wow.
Well, see, Ed, you've lived in the state your whole life. You don't even know that. Isn't that great? Talk about hiding in plain sight.
Okay. All right. As much as I'd like to continue talking about California politicians, because I could talk about for 30 minutes, this is a Thanksgiving episode, and I'm gonna zip my mouth, and we're gonna move on.
Can I give thanks that I'm not living in under Governor Newsom?
No, because that would make me jealous and resentful.
Oh well, we can't have that.
All right, Jonathan has a question. He says, "Dear Mr. Charles, who is your favorite king, queen, emperor, empress, etc.?"
Oh gosh, there's so many. That's a very, very hard question to answer. So I'll just run through a few of my favorites, plural.
No, you need to pick one. You can run through several, but then we need one favorite.
I'll try.
Okay, thank you.
Constantine the Great, the first great Christian Roman emperor, I'm very fond of. He's a saint in the Eastern Church, both Catholic and Orthodox, and the first European, really. I like Theodosius the Great, who made entry into the church and entry into imperial citizenship the same. I like Justinian, who reconquered the West for Rome. I like Blessed Charlemagne, my namesake. very much. I like Otto III, who wanted to reunite East and West very much. I like I like St. Louis, of course. Robert the Pious of France, St. Louis, Alfred the Great, King Arthur, let's not forget King Arthur. The three sainted kings of Scandinavia, Eric, Olaf, and Canute. St. Ferdinand of Spain, who was St. Louis' cousin. Gosh, there's so many. Emperor Sigismund, who ended the Great Schism. You know, he got tired of there being three popes, so he said, "Okay, that's enough now." Bad touch. St. Margaret of Scotland. So let me see. Gosh, I mean, well, I don't want to do this forever. So, Queen Isabella, of course, of Spain, of Castile. Charles V, the Emperor. Moving toward our own time, but again, there's so many. Louis XVI, Charles I, and James II, James III, Charles III, Henry IX, all the latest Stuarts I like. Louis XVI, Gustavus III of Sweden. Very, very fond of them. Tsar Alexander I of Russia. Frederick William IV of Prussia, Franz Joseph, Charles Felix of Sardinia, Don Miguel of Portugal, the Carloses of Spain, the last couple of Bourbons, the two Sicilies, your kings. Let me see.
Okay, he's asking you your favorite, and you've listed like 50.
King Albert of the Belgians, Blessed Kaiser Karl, of course.
We know you like all these. We know these people.
Christian X of Denmark, Gustav V of Sweden. They're all great. But if I had to choose one, I guess it would be Charlemagne.
Why?
Charlemagne or Constantine? Well, because you kind of set the whole thing in motion.
It's interesting. Okay. How hard was his what were the obstacles in Charlemagne? What's the heroic qualities there?
Oh, that he had to fight everywhere.
Yeah.
And I mean the Lombards, the Saxons, the Muslims, the Avars. He was constantly going, putting out fires all over from one end of the empire to the other, going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
Okay.
And yet he found time to revolutionize coinage, to encourage learning, to start what was called the Carolingian Renaissance. He was responsible for all that. Plus, he was responsible to a great degree for the Roman Rite of the Catholic Church that we have today.
Okay, that makes sense. That'll do it. Why did the Greeks abolish the monarchy in 1973?
Well, that's a good question. The king, then as now, was and is King Constantine II, who is a fellow I feel a great deal of admiration for, and not a little sorrow for. Basically, he came to the throne in 1965, and Greece, then as now, was extremely divided between the right and the left. And he was young, and he had a tiger by the tail because Greek politics was so fractious that it showed why a monarchy was necessary, frankly. Unfortunately, that sort of a setup will only work if people play by the rules. So there was a disputed election. The left came into power. They made kind of pro-communist noises, and some junior army officers overthrew the government. And at first, they kept the king on as figurehead. But he realized that rather than wanting to regularize politics, they intended just to stay in power. So he attempted a coup of his own, and he failed. Because he failed in 1967, I guess, he and his family went to exile. And from then until 1973, the colonels in charge of Greece, the army officers, maintained the fiction that Greece was a monarchy, although the king was in exile and was very much opposed to the dictatorship. In 1973, they decided to get rid of him and establish a republic, which they did, using kind of a rigged election. But the next year, they got into it with Turkey over Cyprus, and their regime collapsed, basically. And a quote-unquote conservative politician named Constantine Karamanlis took over, and he betrayed the king.
How?
Although, well, the king kept him afloat in exile. But once he was prime minister, rather than simply restoring the king, he called for another plebiscite on the monarchy. And it was 56 to 42 or something.
Okay, so when the army officers took over the government, and then you had the king on the side who tried a coup and failed.
Yep.
How could he try that if he didn't have the army?
Well, there were elements of the army that were loyal to him. So you got to bear in mind the army was divided, and it was junior officers that overthrew the government and arrested the senior officers. That's why they
how could that be?
Well, because same was happened in Egypt in 1952. The colonels planned among themselves. Remember that they were more in touch with the lesser echelon of the army than the generals were. They plotted. They formed a group. And don't forget, too, that at that time they were very fearful of communist infiltration because the Soviet Union was very much an up-and-going entity in 1967 or 5, whatever it was. And the king was as much afraid of the communists as anyone else was. So things might have been different if he'd resisted them initially. But he really had a terrible situation. He really, really did. And as I say, he's still alive. He's now back in Greece. Unlike the other Balkan kings, they didn't give him his property back. The heirs to the thrones of Bulgaria, Romania, Albania, and Serbia all have most of their possessions back, but not the King of Greece.
I actually just I'm still making my way through your Blessed Charles book, and so they stripped the Habsburgs of all their private property.
They did, and then it was returned in 1935, but then it was seized again by the Nazis in 1938, and the government has held on to it ever since. Nazi loot, you know.
Oh, okay, so it's the property of the Austrian government, not the German government.
No, it's the Austrian government. But see, when Austria was annexed by Germany in 1938, Karl Renner telling the socialists to support it, what should happen but that the Nazis immediately re-seized the Habsburg property. We got to remember, Hitler hated the Habsburgs, kind of like Karl Renner did, because they were buds and stuff. Siamese twins separated at the snout.
Wow. Okay.
Well, Karl Renner was an international socialist. Hitler was a national socialist, so they had a lot in common. The Nazis were, in my grandfather's pithy phrase, brown-shirted Bolsheviks.
Okay, question from Patty. Charles, what do you think of Will and Ariel Durant's 11-volume The History of Civilization?
Well, it's an interesting book. It's got a lot of useful facts in it. It's got a bit of an anti-Catholic slant for a reason that I will now reveal. Will Durant was an apostate, fallen away Catholic, French-Canadian from Worcester, Mass. And what put the seal on his apostasy was that he taught school, and he met this 15-year-old girl who was like 28 or something, and they fell in love. She was Jewish. Nobody approved of it. They got married when she was 16 or something. She was Ariel Durant. And as you can imagine, they had kind of an animus against the church, what with its outmoded moral requirements and so on. But the good news is that Will Durant, before he died, did come back to the church. You'll never guess who converted him.
Well, when did they live? Time period.
Oh, no, you got to guess.
No, I don't know these people.
They died in the 70s.
Who converted them? Where are they from?
Well, they were living in Los Angeles.
What? Okay, what? Criswell? I don't know.
Criswell.
I don't know.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, Criswell converted them to Catholicism. It was a very strange thing. Nobody understood why or how it happened. Yeah, that's exactly it. And Halo Meadows, Criswell's wife, read from the catechism for them. No, it wasn't Criswell. It was James Francis Cardinal McIntyre. Because he was more than a match for Durant intellectually. And, by the time they met, Will and Ariel had been a couple for decades and decades, and they were accepted as, a premier couple. And so when Durant met the Cardinal, he figured that the Cardinal would, start with one of the usual arguments or something. And he was ready for all that. Instead, the Cardinal says, guess you couldn't find a girl your own age, huh? And they both laughed. But that was not what he was expecting.
Okay. Well, that's great. McIntyre wasn't your confessor, was he?
Yes, he was.
He seemed like a real hands-on cardinal.
He sure was. Well, see, he was. Well, there was a word for that. Hold on. No, don't help. Don't help.
Okay. Here it comes. Believer. What?
He was a believer.
Oh, no.
Yes, he believed. I know, thinking of a cardinal or even a bishop that would be interested in souls is very strange. I know. But that was the way he was. One of the things about the cardinal, I've told the story, I think, before, but it bears repeating. He did not have a secretary or anything at the residence for after the what do you call it? My mind's gone. After hours. In other words, if you called the residence before 5, there was a secretary who'd pick up the phone.
Yeah.
But if you called after 5, there was no one there except him. And the thing was, he was in the phone book. Now, the result of all this is, I know it's hard to think of a cardinal being like that, but that was the way it was.
Hello, Cardinal McIntyre.
He would say Cardinal's residence is what he would say, and then you'd talk at him. So what would happen very frequently is that non-Catholics would have a dying Catholic friend. They'd be on the west side. The dying Catholic friend didn't know who to call, what to, so they call the Cardinal. And he would grab his sick kit and drive, and his driving was very scary, but he would drive and give the last rites to the person and then notify the parish they were in so they would do follow-up. And interestingly enough, I never heard this from him. I heard it from other people. The thing about Cardinal McIntyre was that he would never talk about his own, shall we say, pastoral things. But I heard about it from people who'd been on the receiving end, as you might say. And one of these was Monsignor Weber, who's the Archdiocesan Archivist. And he told the story, his first assignment as a priest, and this is way back in the 50s, was at St. Victor's in West Hollywood. And one night, very late, there's a bang on the door, and the pastor gets him up and says, "You go see who it is." It was like 1 a.m. or something. It's quite late. So he goes to the door, and it's the Cardinal. So he, runs and gets the pastor, and the pastor, "Oh, Your Eminence, well, he was all business." He said, "Look, I've just been to see this fellow up in the Hollywood Hills," and he gave him the address. "I've given him the last rites. Here's the address and the phone number. Stay in touch and follow up if you would." And then he got in the car and drove away, and that was it. And that was very, very typical. But sometimes it would be extremely funny. In that it would be extremely funny in that the people would call him, like newsmen and all that, trying to get interviews and so forth, and he would talk to them. Well, on one occasion, it so happened that the body of a Spanish bishop who had died maybe 100 years before was being brought back to Spain from the Philippines. Well, those days you couldn't do a nonstop flight from the Philippines to Spain. The plane, that technology didn't exist. So they had to land in LA, refuel, and then fly on to Spain. So one of the folks in the LA Times called the Cardinal after hours and asked him if he was going to meet Archbishop so-and-so's plane at the airport. Without telling him there's a dead guy. And the Cardinal had heard nothing about it, so he said, "Well, please tell His Grace that I can't be there to meet him, but he's welcome to stay with me here at the residence as long as he likes." That story he told me, because he found out later that he was being made fun of, and that was the thing about the Cardinal. He got as much of a kick out of that kind of thing about him as anybody else did. So when he found out that it was a put on, he roared.
Is there a biography on him?
Like yes.
A book? Yeah.
Yes. 2-volume, which I recommend highly, by Monsignor Weber, called His Eminence of Los Angeles.
Okay. Sounds like a superhero. I mean, for a priest to be on call like that that's heroic. For the Cardinal of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles to do that is unfathomable to me.
Well, see, as I say, and I'm not being funny, he was a real believer.
No, but I mean, just in terms of how do you fit that in? I mean, in terms of all the responsibilities, he
knew how to delegate, for starters, and he was a good, not always, but usually he was a fairly good judge of character, and he had some very able assistants, but he knew enough to do the oversight of things. But although he was very much a brick and mortar bishop, he knew that was a means to an end. Everything else was a means to an end, and the end was the salvation of souls. That was what was the most important thing. And one soul was as important as 1,000 souls, depending on what you could get your hands on. And one of the reasons why he had this sort of unique point of view is that he was the auxiliary bishop of New York back in 1942. And one day he went for his daily walk, and for some reason he grabbed his sick kit, which he didn't used to do, but he grabbed it. And he's walking in the street, and all of a sudden a plane hits the Empire State Building. Well, they were dead everywhere, inside and outside the building, and they were wounded and dying. So he had a sick kit, and he went from person to person to person. And then he went into the building as soon as they said, it's not going to collapse. And he did the same thing in the building. But he never left his residence again without the sick kit.
Wow.
That was James Francis Cardinal McIntyre. And he was the one who reconciled Will Durant.
All right. Next question is from Patrick.
Yeah, Patrick.
Is Mr. Coulombe familiar with the works of Father Denis Fahey? And if so, would he be gracious enough as to share his thoughts?
Yes, he is familiar with the works of Father Denis Fahey, and he will share his thoughts.
Okay.
I like Father Fahey's work very much. The Kingship of Christ and the reorganization of society, the Kingship of Christ in the modern world. He was attacked a lot, and the usual thing they attack him for is claiming that he was anti-Semitic. Well, I have never understood how someone is anti-Semitic if they want Jews to join the church. I've never understood that. To me, you can hardly be said to hate someone if you want him into your family.
You want to oust them from their family and their culture because you feel it's deficient.
So you ban Christmas? And replace it with holiday. Oh, I'm sorry. That's us in the here and
It's more inclusive.
No, it's not. It's exclusive. Because there are a lot of holidays you should honor them, individually. As it stands, it's the holiday season now, from Halloween to Mardi Gras.
That's true.
And it all gets drowned in a big pile of nothing. He certainly resented high finance as anti-Christian, and he was very much against anyone who would de-Christianize society. Now, what does it mean to de-Christianize society? Well, amongst other things, it means getting rid of things like Christmas. Taking crucifixes down off, if you're in a Catholic state, taking crucifixes down off the wall. Just like they did in Quebec this past year. They pulled it off the speaker's seat in the assembly. That kind of miserable garbage is precisely the kind of thing that drove Father Fahey crazy. Drives me crazy, too, as it would anyone who's sane. Because where do they get off? When a ruling class decide that they're going to change the ethos of their subjects, no. They only have a position because of that ethos. If they were honest, they would resign and go somewhere else.
Okay. I'm somewhat familiar with Father Fahey. I know the Kingship of Christ in organized naturalism.
Naturalism.
Yeah. That's sold. That's published and sold by Loretto Publications. They find a traditional Catholic publisher.
Yeah.
So you can
And
get there.
he was a close collaborator, by the way, of Father Cahill, whose book, The Shape of the Christian State, you might have read.
Framework
of Christian State, sorry.
Yes, I have. Quite a book. And the same charges, unfortunately, are laid against Mr. Cahill.
Father Cahill.
Father Cahill, excuse me. I wish we could talk about those sorts of matters more sanely.
We can't, because we've got freedom of speech. Be quiet.
And
freedom of speech means you'll do what you're told.
Well, I'm actually talking about both sides. Like, both sides, actually.
No.
Yeah.
No, my mind's made up. See, the thing is, you shut up one side, and then that side will simply hate the other.
Yeah.
And there's no dialogue possible.
It's one of those things where it's like you have to pick a side, and you can't be in the middle or have a middle ground. You're either...
No, you can't, because everybody's so smart.
Yeah.
And you know how you can tell they're smart? Because the results are so great. What? Look around you. It's paradise on earth.
Okay.
You seem doubting. I can always tell when you're doubting. You know, you're not fooling me for a second. You have doubts. All right, repeat after me. You ready?
No. I'm not going to...
No.
You're trying to brainwash me and program me.
No, I'm just doing what our masters do to us. If it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me.
Oh, okay.
Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. Every day.
Every day.
In every way.
In every way.
We're getting better and better.
We're getting better and better.
There. Now don't you feel better? And you don't feel brainwashed, do you?
That's actually Scientologist stuff. Based off of what my siblings have told me. Are you Scientologist?
I've been accused of a lot of things, but this is the first time that's happened. No, I'm not a Scientologist, but I'll add it to the list of things I've been accused of. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I've got a whole list of them, you know.
Yeah.
The problem is I can't be all of them.
Like what?
Oh gosh, where do I begin? Feeneyite, occultist, Scientologist, sedevacantist, Gnostic, and traditionalist in the Guénon sense, perennialist. Oh golly, Martinist.
What about sedevacantist?
I said sedevacantist.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah. I've been accused of all those things.
All right.
And now Scientologist.
There you go. Question from Isaac. Hello, Charles. I am curious to know, what are your favorite movies? Also, what are your favorite cocktails?
Wow. That's a good set of questions. Okay. Well, my favorite movies are They Might Be Giants, The Late Show, L.A. Confidential, The Rocketeer, Metropolitan, Hush Hush, Sweet Charlotte. Actually, what's that?
What about the one, Dinner for...
Yes, I was about to say. Dinner at 8.
Yeah.
Grand Hotel. And, favorite cocktails. Where do we start? Where do we stop? Well, let's see. I suppose we should go by family, shouldn't we? So we'll start with rum drink, shall we? Yes, I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
Rum and Coke, hot buttered rum, rum punch. Let me see. Bloody Mary, Bronx Cocktail, Harvey Wallbanger, Screwdriver, Bloody Bullshot, and now we'll slip into whiskeys, I guess. Rob Roy, Manhattan, old-fashioned Sazerac cocktail, and rye in any form, any way, anyhow. Rye screwdriver. Rye highballs or rye balls. Jameson's neat.
That's your favorite whiskey?
No, rye whiskey is my favorite, but I do love Jameson's. And there are a lot of single malt scotches and stuff like that I'm quite happy with. Gin and tonic, gin martini, gin Gibson, dry martinis, sweet martinis, perfect martinis. I like all three. And of course, I mentioned the Bronx cocktail.
What's a perfect martini?
Equal amounts of sweet and dry vermouth.
Okay.
And let me see. A Kuwu.
What is that?
It's ginger brandy and ginger brandy and gin. As the country's oldest cocktail, supposedly. Oh, and let's not forget the hot things. Well, not that hot, but hot enough. I like Tom and Jerry's, and I like eggnog, of course, since we're getting into the holidays. That's Christmas for those of us who are wondering what I mean by the holidays.
Taylor Marshall posted something where Jägermeister and eggnog, and I thought, no, thank you, sir.
Well, if you really want to feel ill, Jägermeister and Goldschlager.
Okay, that's actually redundant. I mean, that's
no, they're very different, but they're both disgusting.
I feel like that's redundant because you've got licorice plus. They're both super sweet tastes. That's like
licorice.
It wouldn't make sense to put them together, you know?
No, they do. I forget what it's called, but it's pretty obnoxious. One of the two worst hangovers I ever had in my life was not Jägermeister, but Goldschlager. It was horrible.
Yeah, mine actually. I can't handle tequila.
I can't either because that was for my worst hangover. Yeah. I can barely tolerate it in a Long Island iced tea, which I also like, by the way. I do like Long Island iced teas. So I guess you'd say there are a lot of cocktails I enjoy. I mentioned gin and tonics, didn't I?
Yeah.
Oh, and I like scotches neat. I like whiskey. I do like neat. No, mid juleps, of course. And I like Café Brûlot, Diabolique, the way they make it at Antoine's. With rum and brandy, and they set it afire, and they set the whole tablecloth in flames, then you toss it back.
Okay.
And the Feuerzangenbowle, the rum punch that they drink around Christmas here and in Germany.
Okay, 2 questions out of that really long list. Rob Roy is a very famous drink. What is in that?
Well, the Rob Roy is like a Manhattan, only instead of rye, you have scotch and vermouth. If you have a dry Rob Roy, it's served. It's the scotch with a touch of sweet dry vermouth. Dry vermouth, and a twist. And then if it's a sweet Rob Roy, then it's sweet vermouth and a cherry. The interesting thing is that in the east of the United States, you just order a Rob Roy, it's always dry. Same with the Manhattan. If you order it in the West and don't specify, it's always sweet.
Wow.
Just like in the East, they put horseradish into Bloody Marys, they don't in the West.
Whoa. I didn't know that. I guess because I never had Bloody Mary on the East Coast.
Yeah, it gives it a little extra kick.
I don't think I would like that.
No, it's good. It's good. I'm very open and accepting when it comes to cocktails.
The other cocktail that sounded interesting is this hot buttered rum.
Yeah.
What's that? I mean, like, so you put butter in it? What?
You sure do. Basically, you've got rum, butter, honey, and hot water. Traditionally, it was done with they would take a red hot poker and stick it in a vat of water, and then pour the water into the ingredients. Now I just heat it up, but it's a great winter drink. You've never met him, I don't think, but your brother knows my friend in New York, Rich Count Guido. Rich is a great guy, Catholic writer. But when I introduced him to hot buttered rum, he was kind of under the weather, so I made it for him. We drank that stuff. He got pretty toasted, but he felt much better.
Okay, I'm feeling pretty good, so let's go on a tangent here. I'm remembering a conversation I had with my brother about the Bacardi family.
Ah, yes.
And about how they're so resilient and how rum came out of the Caribbean islands, right?
Yeah, it did initially, yeah.
And so how I think we were talking about how flexible they were. Like even when the communists took over, they kind of shuffled, right?
No, they left, but they started a new rum distillery in Puerto Rico. What you'll see over here in Europe as Havana Club is actually the Bacardi distillery in Cuba, now under government management.
I see. And so, yeah, I mean, they are the rum brand, are they not? Yeah.
Well, there are others. I mean, don't forget both the French and the British islands have their own rums. So you've got things like Mount Gay in Barbados, but every Caribbean island, and also places like Mauritius and Reunion and all that, they all have their own rums. India, well, I wrote a book. I wrote a history of rum.
Sure. Well, that's why I'm asking you. Yeah.
And Queensland, Australia, the Bundaberg area, wherever there's sugar is grown, you have rum. So there are Hawaiian rums. There are Brazilian rums. They have a drink they call cachaça there, which I'm sure that our Brazilian friends who we were talking about earlier will have sampled. There's aguardiente. The Syrians have arak. Interestingly enough, your people, the Slovaks, on your mother's side, they make something very similar out of sugar beets, and they call it rum. But when they joined the EU, the EU wouldn't let them call it rum, so now they call it But I have to admit, whenever I go to Slovakia, I love tossing that stuff back. It's quite good. And I've never seen it outside Slovakia.
Okay. And one omission, surprise when it comes to rum is I don't believe you mentioned Mai Tais. You're not a fan of Mai Tais?
No, I didn't. Mai Tais are good, and zombies.
Yeah.
Drink it or be it.
Yeah.
At the late lamented Nino, actually I think it's still going, by USC, my definitely late and lamented friend Matt Hale and I pioneered the 5 Zombie Club.
5 Zombie Club? What is that? You did 5 glasses?
5 zombies with lunch. And you could join the club if you could function afterwards.
I don't want to try.
No,
I like zombies too.
Yeah, but believe me, you gotta have, I don't know, a liver of steel to be able to function after 5. Trust me. But we did it.
Okay.
I remember the now deceased Mark Dockery said when he watched us doing this, he said, "You guys think you're so big with your zombies. I'll show you something." And he turned to the bartender and he says, "Make me a double zombie." And the bartender looked at him and he said, "Let me show you something, sir." And he assembled the zombie in front of him. It's got 4 different kinds of rum and a little bit of fruit juice. He says, "Now you see, I can make you 2 of these, but I can't make you a double because it's almost all rum." And of course, it was the 151 floater on the top that really pushes you over the edge.
Yeah.
As I recall, it was dark rum, light rum, spiced rum, and some other ingredients, and then just on the top, the 151 floater.
Yeah, well, that's like double that. That's like literally double the alcohol.
Yeah.
So
and there were giants on the earth in those days. The happy days of the early 80s when my biggest question was, where's the next drink? Great times. I was a comedian back then. I felt I had the world by the tail. And although I'm glad those days are over, but I'm glad they happened. And that's true of just about everything in my life. I've enjoyed it all, even the bad parts in retrospect, because without the bad parts, I wouldn't be where I am. And I'm very happy to be where I am right now. And I don't mean that simply physical location. I mean it's totality. I'm grateful to God for the life I have.
Right. Question from Nate.
All right, Nate.
Can Charles tell me about Frank Sheed? I'm reading his book, Theology and Sanity, and it is incredible.
Frank Sheed was a young Australian who, he was a cradle Catholic, I believe. He went to England, as so many young Australians did in those days, and still do. Then they went to pursue literary careers or become actors. Now they go to become lifeguards or bartenders. But Britain is still quite a magnet for young Australians, as it is for young New Zealanders and Canadians. Well, South Africans, West Indians. Anyway, while he was there, he met a lady named Maisie Ward. Now, Maisie came from a family of converts. I believe her father's name was Wilfred Ward, I think. Could be wrong, but I think that was it. But her family were converts. I think Frank, she was sort of upper class, or upper middle. He was sort of lower class, but they both very devoted to the faith. They got married. And then they started a publishing house called, Sheed and Ward. And eventually they were brought to the United States. And Sheed and Ward moved from London to New York. The man who was responsible for their coming to New York was the literary editor of America Magazine, the Jesuit magazine. And his name was Father Leonard Feeney. He brought Sheed and Ward to New York. And there's a very famous joke, because he was a big part in getting them set up in the States. The three of them were walking down the street, and he was between them as they're walking down. He grabs both their arms and says, "I'm the and in Sheed and Ward." So, at any rate, interestingly enough, after Father Feeney was destroyed by the hierarchy, Frank Sheed, in his memoirs, spoke about him. And he said something which, although he didn't agree with him, he said something which speaks both to Sheed's own integrity and to the reality of the situation. What he said was that Father Feeney was silenced but never answered. And I think that's fair to say. But at any rate, that's and then they had a son who I don't think much of, lost the faith and all that. He's a writer, but I try not to think about him.
Sheed and Ward, as a publishing entity, in my mind, as a modern-day Catholic publisher, Sheed and Ward is as epic as it gets. I don't know how that happened. How could one publishing house literally publish every single popular Catholic book?
Well, because in England they knew everybody. They knew Belloc, they knew Chesterton, they knew all the major Catholic figures of their time, say about 1920 to 1960.
I mean, that's fine that they know everybody, but literally no one else has such an enterprise? No one else is
Not
interested in Catholic publishing?
Oh, there were others. There were others. I mean, Doubleday had Image Books. There were others, but Sheen and Ward were the most popular. And as I say, they knew everybody. That was so important. In those days, publishing, you were saying earlier how you wished it was more personal and hands-on. Well, it was. In those days, and not just Catholic publishing either. The man who taught me how to write, Carl Van Horn, my writing instructor at the Institute, New Mexico Military Institute, for those who are wondering, and even for those who weren't, in beautiful Roswell, New Mexico, home of the aliens. Okay, we said that. Mr. Van Horn knew very well a fellow called Max Perkins. Now, Max Perkins is not a name you're probably familiar with, but he was for a very long time, he was the editor of a publishing house in New York called Scribner's. And they published Fitzgerald and Hemingway and Thomas Wolfe and a lot of other people like that in the 30s and 40s. Max Perkins knew all these guys, and he did more than know them. He worked with them, and that's what Sheen and Ward did. They worked with their authors in helping them to develop their talents. That was what editors did. Today, if anybody does it, it's to some degree the agents. Publishers don't have time for that. But in those days, what you didn't already know, your editor would teach you. And with Perkins, amongst the many funny things about him, Thomas Wolfe loved to write, but he wrote incessantly. So he would literally drop off trunks full of manuscripts with Perkins, who would go through them all and pull a book out of it.
Wow.
So when you read Look Homeward Angel or Time in the River and that kind of stuff, Max Perkins, his judicious cutting is what allowed a book to appear out of all the stuff that Thomas Wolfe wrote.
That's impressive. I don't know if I could tolerate that. Somebody dumping all of that.
Well, you probably could if his writing was wonderful and
That's
if you
true.
really loved it.
That's true.
If it was just a question of taking a ton of what you really enjoyed and turning it into something that you knew the public could read, you would probably enjoy doing that. And the books would be yours in a way that they'd be no one else's.
Yeah.
So, because that was the thing. I mean, although it was always a business, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's not like they were doing all this out of the goodness of their hearts.
Of course.
But they took a deep. They had a love of literature. There's a phrase that's almost gone today, and when you hear it, it's just cheap advertising. But it used to mean something. This is an important book. And that meant that the publisher or the editor or both thought that the book had something to say and was a worthwhile contribution to the great conversation.
That's how, I mean, I believe that. Like the books that we publish, I absolutely believe that. I don't use it as a marketing line, though.
No, but it's nevertheless, it's an important attitude to have.
Yeah.
I mean, it goes back to something that used to be called the life of the mind. And the idea that the world of letters is a worthy endeavor, worthy of pursuing on its own right. For the writer, for the publisher, for the editor, it's a question of producing work that will benefit and enrich the public. And that's something that a lot of outlets have lost sight of. It's one of the reasons I'm very grateful, though, because to a great degree I've made my living and my career through words and through engaging in this great to me endeavor. I really feel very strongly about that. I just had someone sent me a note about one of my articles. Said, "What a great sentence." This is from a recent article of mine. By forcing their subjects to wear masks, the leadership have removed theirs.
Yeah, you also kind of said that on the show last episode, but yeah, that's from your Civil War article for Crisis Magazine, which I read. It was a very nice article.
Yeah, but see, the thing is, it's not just about the facts you're presenting; it's how you present them, and doing so in a way that will not. How do I put this? I have some of the best teachers, and I've read some of the best literature, and if I can help people appreciate and enjoy and improve their own use of the language, then I'm very grateful. And to be honest with you, the other languages that I wish I could have devoted quite as much time to, French, German, and Spanish, and Italian. I wish I was as good at communicating in all those languages as I am in English, but you can't do everything.
Right. Question from Nathaniel.
All right.
I have a question for Charles. I just had my first child, and I want to ensure that they have a proper understanding of history. What are some good history books that I can use to educate my kids? I've already read Puritan's Empire, gave my copy to my dad, and then bought a new copy to ensure that I always have a place in my library. That it always has a place in my library. So it is definitely already on the list, and each one of my kids will get their own copy.
Well, I know some standard histories you can use. You have to reinterpret them from a Catholic viewpoint, but they're interesting in terms of facts. One is the Universal Golden History of the World. This is a richly illustrated multi-volume set that goes basically from quote-unquote prehistoric days till 1965 or 66, which is when we bought it, oddly enough. Multi-volume set, as I say, beautifully illustrated. You really have to go through it with a fine-tooth comb. For instance, it's pro-Luther and anti-papal and that kind of thing. But it will give you a basic framework, which is what the kids have to acquire. They need a basic framework. There are a lot of American Heritage came out with 2 different series of American histories that are worthwhile. But again, you got to read them yourself first. Will and Ariel Durant, who came up earlier, again, very useful, fact-filled, but you got to check them. And of course, Belloc is good on everything except the French Revolution.
And there's no decent Catholic scholarship that can provide a solid history?
Well, Warren Carroll wrote some good things and so on, but what you don't often get from Catholic histories are the details, and they very often they concentrate on a particular important period. Like, for instance, Eamon Duffy's The Stripping of the Altars is one of the best things you'll see about the English Reformation. But you won't see a general thing. Oh, another good book, Kevin Phillips's The Cousins' Wars, which deals with the Reformation, the Wars of the Three Kingdoms, the Jacobite Wars, the American Revolution, the American Civil War, as stages in the same development. But of course, he thinks that development was a great thing, which a Catholic would not necessarily.
What you always mention, Viscount Bryce?
Well, for the Holy Roman Empire, absolutely.
Yeah.
The book on the empire.
Okay. Final question today from Jacob. The question that I would implore you to answer. What are your recommendations for Advent reading? There are just too many books to choose from, so I would love to hear your input.
Okay. Well, I would recommend Dom Guéranger, absolutely.
Liturgical Year.
The Liturgical Year. Oddly enough, the Advent volume. Go figure.
Yeah.
Volume 1.
So you can get that as well from Loretto Publications. Hardcover the entire liturgical year is like $500, which I did buy a couple years ago, and it's absolutely worth it. But yeah, if you want just an Advent volume, that will save you several $100s.
Yeah, and it'll get you through Advent. Also, we've got Bossuet's Advent sermons, I think.
Right. And so he was a contemporary of Guéranger?
No.
Oh,
no. He was 17th century.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, okay.
He was the court preacher to Louis XIV.
There we go.
And Bishop of Meaux.
Yeah, I read his... Now, I can vouch for this a little bit. I haven't read his Meditations of Advent yet, because I just got started on him this year. I read his Meditations for Lent, and that was very good. And I highly recommend it. So I'm assuming this is going to be just as good. Published by Sophia Press, which is a good, solid press.
Sure are. And so that would be my recommendations for Advent reading. Also, you want to get a really good Advent calendar with really yummy chocolates.
Yeah.
Just thought I'd mention that.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, gratuitous plug from me, published by Tumblr House, From Afar, by Roger Thomas. This is an incredible book. It brought tears to my eyes in the climax. It's about the three wise men, the journey of the three wise men. It's kind of historical fiction, but it's quite wonderful. Yeah, I feel very blessed to have even published this. Roger Thomas is an incredibly intelligent guy. I've did some interviews with him, 2 different interviews, one on this book, another on his other book, Under the Watchful Sky, both fiction. So you guys, if you're interested in Roger Thomas, you can find that on our YouTube channel. So there you go. Both books are about $14, $15. So if you get both of his books, free shipping and handling. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay, so what were you... Sorry to interrupt.
No, not at all. So, well, that was our last question. This is, of course, an extraordinary Thanksgiving Day treat for you and us, ladies and gentlemen. You at some point, probably you're watching this, because you wouldn't have known yet. You would have known, like, on Monday you're ready for us.
Yeah.
But this is Thanksgiving, so Lord knows when will have popped into your consciousness that we're here for you. I hope you're enjoying all of the delicious turkey and stuffing and all that.
Pumpkin pie.
Oh, yes, pumpkin pie.
Yams, my favorite. Candied yams. That is just my favorite. Ugh.
And, of course, green bean casserole. I know everyone loves that.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, indeedy. Cream of mushroom soup. The onions on top. Yep. Mashed potatoes. Stuffing. Delicious, delectable stuffing. All of that good stuff. Some of which, by the way, I'll be having myself because I mentioned I got a turkey for each house here. So we're the kids are going to do all of the sides. So I've tried to figure out how I was going to handle it, and I realized the best thing I could do is have dinner with one set and then go on a sort of tour of inspection and sample what everybody else does.
Yeah, you got to make sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, to make sure it turned out all right, because I mean I'm doing it for them. It's not about me. But the important thing to bear in mind. There are several important things. One is that St. Andrew's Day and the end of November is coming up, as well as the beginning of Advent. So
that snuck up on us when the priest said that last week. Oh, this is the last week before Advent. I was like, wait, what?
It sure is. Advent is coming. Keep it as strictly as you can. Keep it like another Lent if you're able to. And that should be easy this year because there'll be no Christmas parties.
Yeah, I'm planning on that, especially because, I don't know, I feel like we're closer to the end than the beginning on this COVID thing. I really do. I mean, I know a lot of trad faithful probably might disagree, but I feel we're getting close. And so as in a marathon, when you're in the home stretch, you start to sprint. And so I feel like fasting is appropriate in that sense. This is we're in the final stretch, break into a sprint via fasting, and it sort of creates a culmination, I guess you could say, with Christmas, a special trying to get over the hump, I guess you could say.
It does indeed, but I would recommend 3 days you don't fast on.
Oh, okay, yeah.
St. Andrews.
Mm-hmm.
For all of us Scotsmen. For St. Nicholas's Day, December the 6th.
Okay.
Especially for all of you Barii people, Barese, you know who you are. And December the 8th, the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, which is not just the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, it's the United States National Feast Day. It should be for us what St. Patrick's Day is to the Irish, what St. Jean-Baptiste is to the French Canadians, what St. Louis is to the French, what the Assumption is to the French, what the Assumption is to the Acadians, what St. Denis is to the French, what St. Genevieve is to the French.
What? St. Joseph to the Italians? Does that work?
Yeah, him too.
Yeah.
And St. Anthony.
Yeah.
St. Stephen to the Hungarians and the Slovaks.
Okay.
Actually, I don't think the Slovaks... Well, yeah, they do actually take St. Stephen as their patron, I think. Anyway, and certainly Our Lady of Nitra. But
St. Thomas to the Catholics in India.
yeah.
Right? Yeah.
St. George to the English, St. David to the Welsh, St. James to the Spanish.
I was shocked on EWTN. They showed Catholicism in India, and it makes sense, but I didn't really know how much devotion they had to St. Thomas over there. How big of a thing. It's just enormous.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, all of that being the case, December the 8th should be our big American day. So, if you want to put out your flag, do so. But above all, pray to Our Lady of the Immaculate Conception for our poor country. So many layers of garbage, it's hard to pick one out from the other. But pray very hard to her that somehow the country come out of all this drivel in one piece and that she convert. Because without that, our country has no long-term future. I don't know what she has, but one thing I have to say, ladies and gentlemen, that two things certainly have come to me in the 2 years I've been away from home. One is that we Americans really are Europeans. We should stop pretending. We are. And both certainly culturally and to a huge extent in DNA. We should stop pretending. As should the Australians and the Latin Americans and everybody else. Even if you say, oh, well, they're mestizo, stop. They're speaking Spanish. There are very few of them that still speak Indian languages. I mean, if you do, that's one thing, but most people don't. They speak Spanish, Portuguese, and French, Dutch, or it's true in all the Europe across the seas. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is it has certainly underlined how much I do love my country. I've been in all 50 states, and I love each one of them. Not because of the shining city on the hill or the last best hope of mankind or blah, blah, blah.
As you point out, a country is made up of much more than its government.
Yeah. Our country is the country, as I've said before, that invented the cocktail, that invented the Broadway musical and the polio vaccine, jazz. Again, a lot of these things may not have been great uplifting. They're pretty bloody good. And worth being proud of. So that's something to give thanks for. I mean, I'm not a great lover of the Pilgrims and the Puritans and all that, but they're part of the story. And without them, we wouldn't be here. You know, it took generations of pagans to make one Cattery Tekakwitha, the great Lily of the Mohawks.
Saint, yeah, the famous saint.
And it took generations of pagans to produce her. So it took, whatever we have, it took generations of drivel to produce. Some of it good, a lot of it not. Grateful for all the peoples in our peculiar nation, the Pinocchio of countries. It will take the faith to make her a real country, the way it took the good fairy to make Pinocchio a real boy. But with God's grace and Our Lady's intercession and our own work and prayer, please God, one day, sooner or later, it will come about. But regardless of all of that, ladies and gentlemen, especially now, think about all the things there are in your life to feel grateful for. Your family, your friends, the good times you've had, the good memories you've got. Above all, the Mass, the sacraments that you've attended, God Himself, the Church, everything. Everything, ladies and gentlemen. Look at what's good in your life. Don't worry about the garbage. There's always going to be garbage. But if you're the kind of person who always sees the worm in every apple, and on the one hand, and on the other, allows the perfect to be the enemy of the good, you will not only make yourself miserable, you'll make everyone around you miserable, and that's even worse. So don't do that. Rejoice. Be grateful. Be happy. God has given you the time and the life you've got. Use it to the best of your ability. And if the best, for whatever reason, isn't enough, well, too bad. You've done your best. That's all you have to do. You don't have to do more than that. I truly wish, ladies and gentlemen, we could all get together in one huge assembly hall somewhere. We can't this side of the grave. But we can be assured of one thing. This particular Thanksgiving,
it's off the menu, right? Wait, what?
Yes.
Is that what we're doing?
Yes.
Okay.
And on this particular Thanksgiving,
the soul you save
may be your own. Gobble, gobble.
See you, everyone.